A girl named Yumi accidentally discovered a strange woman getting out of her boyfriend's car. At first, Yumi didn't think much of it, because her boyfriend Bobby had once told her that a new intern at his company lived in the same neighborhood. The intern had to transfer buses several times to get to work, and Bobby felt it would be unkind to ignore her. What Yumi didn't expect, however, was that this intern turned out to be a sweet and adorable young woman. The moment she saw her, a sense of insecurity crept into Yumi's heart. This feeling only intensified when she saw the intern and Bobby laughing happily while grilling meat together. Despite her unease, Yumi kept her composure and even graciously invited the intern, Doon, to join them for the meal. Doon initially wanted to leave, but Bobby, unaware of Yumi's feelings, also insisted she stay. When Bobby stepped away briefly during the meal, Yumi and Doon started chatting. Doon brought up Bobby and praised him for being humorous and charming, which made Yumi's heart tighten with unease. Later, when Bobby went to the supermarket, he happened to see Doon walking back wearing only thin clothes. Out of kindness, he lent her an extra coat from his car. Yumi, waiting at the door for Bobby to return, was surprised to see Doon wearing Bobby's coat. Even though she understood that Bobby likely encountered Doon on the road and lent her the coat out of concern, she still couldn't help but feel upset. In truth, Bobby had never paid much attention to Doon. When she first spoke to him, he didn't even know who she was. But Doon had already been drawn to him, captivated by the calm, mature man he was at work and the confident, attractive man he was outside of it. When she heard he would be giving her rides to work, her heart nearly burst with joy. Despite her feelings, Doon was very aware that Bobby was someone she could never have. He had a girlfriend, and he often spoke highly of Yumi at work. Doon had no intention of crossing any lines or interfering with their relationship. She quietly resigned and decided to return to her hometown. But on the day of her departure, she unexpectedly ran into Bobby. Overwhelmed by emotion, she couldn't hold back and confessed her feelings to him, saying that although her feelings weren't wrong, she knew he already had a girlfriend. Under normal circumstances, she knew she shouldn't have said anything. But emotions are strange. Even though Bobby hadn't cared about Doon before, hearing her confession stirred something in his heart. He began to recall how cute Doon looked when she smiled, how she was always full of energy, and how diligent and dependable she was at work. These strange thoughts arose, despite him knowing that the person he truly loved was Yumi. He would miss her even if they didn't talk for a single day. If he heard that she had suffered at work, even if he wasn't by her side, he'd immediately buy her a bunch of desserts to cheer her up. Christmas soon arrived, and Yumi decided to go to Jeju Island to spend the holiday with Bobby. When she arrived, she noticed a real estate agent showing someone around his apartment. Only then did she realize that Bobby was planning to move. He explained that he just wanted to find an apartment closer to work. Although Yumi felt uneasy, especially since Bobby once said he loved driving by the seaside, she chose to respect his decision. Wanting to surprise Bobby when he returned home, Yumi decorated his apartment early and even bought a cake. But when she returned, she saw Doon standing awkwardly outside Bobby's home. Doon looked flustered and unnatural when she saw Yumi. Yumi calmly told her that she might not see Bobby again, since he was moving. When Yumi asked if Doon was a close friend, Doon awkwardly responded, "Best friend." The truth quickly came to light. When Yumi learned that Doon had confessed her feelings to Bobby, her eyes welled up with tears. It was then that she realized Bobby was moving because of Doon. That evening, Bobby returned with a bouquet of flowers, only to find Yumi gone. She wasn't answering her phone either. Desperate, he drove around looking for her and eventually spotted her near a cafe. When Yumi calmly asked why he was moving, Bobby froze. His secret had been exposed. His silence said everything. Yumi's heart shattered. She never imagined she would break up like this with the man who had stood by her through some of the hardest times in her life. Before meeting Bobby, Yumi had been in a relationship for a year. She believed that man was the one and even proposed marriage. But her ex, Guong, was a man who always prioritized his career. Although he did love Yumi, he had no intention of settling down. The harsh reality eventually brought their relationship to an end. Yumi accepted it rationally and gracefully. But at night, the loneliness was overwhelming. Looking at his photos, she felt the urge to send a message and try to win him back. She wanted to reach out, but worried that doing so immediately after breaking up would make her seem desperate. So, she forced herself to sleep and tried to stop thinking about the breakup. She regretted bringing up marriage. It wasn't even something she truly wanted at the time. To win Guong back, she had completely let go of her pride. She waited nervously, but her hope never materialized. In that moment, Yumi truly understood they had broken up for real. Fighting back tears, she deleted Guong's contact information and forced herself to move on. Although Yumi's heart was clouded with sorrow, she didn't want to show it in front of her colleagues. She worked hard to present a cheerful and optimistic front, but inside, her emotions were turbulent. After days of struggling, she finally gave in and accepted the breakup. However, while washing her hair one day, a call from an unknown number shattered her fragile peace. For a moment, she thought it was Guong calling to propose. In a rush, she hurried to grab her phone, her hands still wet, but the voice on the other end was simply someone asking if she wanted to represent a biotech product. That sudden wave of disappointment made her realize she still had feelings for Guong. Unable to resist, Yumi began checking his social media and unexpectedly discovered he had changed his profile photo to a couple's picture. This seemingly ordinary change pierced her heart, reigniting all her suppressed emotions. She couldn't sleep again. Restless and needing to know more, she began digging through friends of friends' photos until she finally spotted Guong, her once beloved, now only viewable from behind a screen. The reality of the breakup was painfully clear. She had to accept that he was no longer hers. She changed her own profile bio to a crying emoji. On the other side of the screen, Guong saw it and couldn't help but tear up too. Their longing had grown with the darkness of night. Just then, a colleague who had a quiet crush on Yumi called to say he had a proposal draft he wanted her to see. That day, Yumi waited for Bobby in her apartment complex for a long time. Just as she was about to call him, Bobby finally showed up. He greeted her in his usual warm tone, telling her she was doing well and encouraging her. Though confused at first, Yumi felt comforted. His words helped soothe her wounded heart. She started to embrace her daily routines again, discovering that the best way to forget an ex might be to open herself up to something new. Unexpectedly, she found that she and Bobby shared common interests. Both of them enjoyed reading romance novels. At Bobby's recommendation, Yumi picked up a novel that matched her tastes so well that she stayed up all night reading it. The next morning, she returned the book to Bobby, along with some chocolate cookies. That small gesture made her feel closer to him. Over time, through small interactions and shared moments, they grew more familiar with each other. One day on her way home from work, Yumi was caught off guard when Bobby confessed his feelings to her. It was the first time since her breakup that anyone had done so. She wondered, if she started a new relationship with Bobby, could she finally move on from Guong and escape the pain of heartbreak? But Yumi was also a rational person. Deep down, she knew she didn't have genuine romantic feelings for Bobby. So she calmly turned him down. Bobby had been quietly looking forward to her answer, but his hopes were ultimately dashed. Back home, Yumi wasn't even sure if she had done the right thing. Still, she didn't want to start something casually. She wasn't ready. After that day, every time Yumi saw Bobby, she felt guilty for rejecting him. She found herself secretly checking his social media and watching his updates. She mustered the courage to greet him proactively, but to her surprise, Bobby responded coldly. Yumi guessed he might be hurt by her rejection. She tried to comfort herself, thinking Bobby was just reserved with everyone. But that illusion was quickly shattered when, moments later, she saw him enthusiastically chatting with someone else. Wanting to ease the awkwardness between them, Yumi offered to help Bobby carry some things, but he refused coldly. The rejection hurt her, and her heart ached for him. The next morning, while boarding the wrong bus, Yumi unexpectedly saw Bobby with his ex-girlfriend. The girl playfully tugged on Bobby's sleeve before they got on the bus together and left. In that moment, Yumi realized the real reason Bobby had been so distant the day before. It wasn't because of the failed confession. It was because he had gotten back together with his ex. Yumi felt deeply embarrassed for having misread the situation. She told herself it was all for the best, but deep down, something inside her was beginning to shift. One evening after work, Yumi was invited by colleagues to a group dinner. Only when she arrived did she realize it was a gathering organized by Bobby's team. Her mood instantly soured. During the meal, some gossipy coworkers began teasing Bobby, asking if he had someone he liked. They even joked about how ungrateful the girl must be to reject someone as amazing as Bobby. When Bobby said yes but told them that she rejected him, they even joked about how ungrateful the girl must be to reject someone as amazing as Bobby. Her taste must be awful, a colleague sneered. Yumi sat beside them, feeling extremely guilty, so guilty she couldn't even lift her head. She couldn't help but suspect that Bobby had said those things on purpose, just loud enough for her to hear, to make himself look like the victim. After the dinner ended, Yumi had no choice but to face the awkward situation of riding the bus home with Bobby. Not wanting to raise suspicion among colleagues, she forced herself onto the bus. The whole ride, she barely dared to breathe. Bobby attempted to break the ice and lighten the mood, but Yumi kept her responses minimal and distant. Suddenly, Bobby rang the stop bell. He stood up and said that he needed to change buses. Yumi thought it was odd. This wasn't his usual route. But Bobby insisted, claiming he was already on the wrong bus and had to go another way. Before she could say anything more, he was gone. Yumi remained seated, dazed. Bobby's sincerity and boldness caused her heart to race. She couldn't help but admire his courage to stay open with his feelings, even after being rejected. Gradually, Yumi found herself paying more attention to him again. His habits, how many buttons he left undone on his shirt. Then one day, she overheard from a friend that Bobby was going on a blind date. The woman he was meeting was not only gorgeous but also understanding and considerate, the exact type Bobby was said to like. Yumi felt a wave of bitterness. If she hadn't said she only wanted to be friends, would Bobby have gone on this blind date? Regret gnawed at her, making it hard to focus at work. She debated whether to tell him how she really felt, to stop him from going and confess that she liked him too. But the idea felt impulsive. After all, she had just turned him down not long ago. She thought about how Bobby had tossed out the couple ring from his past relationship with zero hesitation. Maybe he had already given up on her too. On the day of the blind date, Yumi couldn't bring herself to do anything. She fell asleep on the sofa, exhausted by her own emotional turmoil. When she woke up, there was a message from Bobby. He said he wanted to return her umbrella. But when she checked the timestamp, she realized she had completely missed his text. She replied half-heartedly, saying he could return it another day. To her surprise, Bobby responded instantly, asking if she could meet at the cafe at 10 a.m. Yumi was overwhelmed with excitement. The next morning, she woke up early and dressed carefully. She wanted to show up as the best version of herself in front of the man she liked. The moment Bobby saw her, his eyes lit up. That spark of emotion reignited between them. After handing over the umbrella, Yumi took the chance to invite him for coffee, hoping to discreetly ask about how his date went. But Bobby kept checking his phone, making Yumi assume the date must have gone really well. Disappointment crept in. Just as she was about to give up hope, she received a phone call from a coworker who revealed that Bobby never even went on the blind date. In fact, the messages he'd been sending were apologies to the blind date for canceling. He had told her that he wasn't emotionally ready, having just been rejected by someone he liked. Relieved and deeply moved, Yumi felt the weight lift from her chest. She decided not to hide her feelings anymore. With one simple and direct confession, she tore down the wall between them, and just like that, they fell in love. Since they worked in the same company, they kept their relationship a secret from coworkers. They'd steal quick moments together, like brushing hands when no one was looking, or slipping notes into files. Bobby would discreetly deliver her favorite snacks, and Yumi would use specific codes to suggest date nights. Their first official date was at a humble street food stall. When it came time to order, Yumi hesitated. She loved the place's famous beef intestines, but looking at Bobby, neat, clean-cut, not the type to enjoy offal, she hesitated. Wanting to leave a good impression, she was about to say she didn't like intestines, but then she caught herself. Hiding her preferences in a relationship wasn't healthy, so instead she blurted out the truth. To her delight, Bobby smiled and completely accepted her taste. His easygoing nature immediately melted Yumi's early dating jitters. At that moment, Yumi understood how freeing it was to be her true self in love. She felt grateful for Bobby's kindness and patience. After the meal, they went to grab coffee. Yumi was so thrilled about the tasty food she almost floated down the stairs, until she tripped. Flailing, she caught herself by grabbing Bobby's shoulder, then noticed the firmness of his chest beneath his shirt. In her heart, she whispered, "Wow, he definitely works out." Embarrassed and blushing, she found herself falling into his arms. Both of them froze for a moment, red-faced and breathless. Their eyes met briefly before darting away again. Though the atmosphere between them was still slightly awkward, it was filled with lingering sweetness and fluttering hearts. Yumi couldn't help but feel that being with you, Bobby, was pure happiness. He wasn't just helping her heal from the scars of her past relationship. Every day felt bright. Bobby always seemed to know what she needed before she did. When he saw she was cold, he would immediately drape his jacket over her. If he discovered a fun place, he'd take her there without hesitation. Whether in his confession or in their day-to-day moments, Yumi felt deeply loved and cherished. It gave her a sense of confidence she hadn't felt in a long time. As soon as Yumi got in the car, Bobby casually handed her 2 mint candies. The moment she popped one into her mouth, it hit her. Was this his subtle way of hinting at a kiss later? Her heart fluttered wildly. Determined to be ready, she started chewing the candy faster. Bobby, watching her with amused eyes, commented that he didn't know she liked biting into candy so quickly. Yumi froze. Wait, was he really just offering mints with no hidden meaning? Embarrassment flooded her cheeks. She was still mentally scolding herself when they arrived. That night, back at home, Yumi's ceiling light broke. With no choice, she asked if she could crash at Bobby's place just for the night. On the way over, she noticed him giving her an odd look. It wasn't until they stepped into the elevator that she realized she was still wearing a sheet mask on her face. Mortified, she laughed awkwardly while Bobby just smiled. She rushed into the bathroom and nearly screamed when she looked in the mirror. How embarrassing! She took out what she thought was her loungewear to change into, but froze again. It was a lacy camisole she'd brought by mistake. As if things couldn't get worse, just then Bobby offered her a change of clothes, his sleep shirt. Yumi tried it on, but it barely reached her thighs. She was too embarrassed to look at him, and Bobby, equally flustered, couldn't bring himself to look at her either. The air was so thick with awkward tension that Yumi wished she could just vanish into the floor. Bobby suddenly asked if she wanted to shower. As he stepped closer, Yumi backed into a corner, her heart racing. But it turned out he was only trying to show her the bath products. She laughed it off, hiding her embarrassment. While Bobby went to shower, Yumi waited on the couch, but exhaustion overcame her, and she soon dozed off. When he returned, he found her fast asleep. He turned off the lights, gently placed a blanket over her, and slid a pillow under her head. Then he sat nearby, gazing at her with quiet affection before eventually falling asleep beside her. It was a quiet, simple night, but to Yumi, it was filled with happiness. The next morning, she opened her eyes to the sight of Bobby's handsome sleeping face. Her heart skipped a beat. As they locked eyes, Yumi blushed uncontrollably. After getting ready, Bobby took her to a library. The warm, peaceful atmosphere of the place made her fall even more in love. Yumi recalled the dream she once had, to become a writer. With Bobby's encouragement, that long-forgotten ambition was rekindled. Motivated and decisive, she quit her job and took the bold step of starting a new life as a writer at the age of 33. To outsiders, it might have looked like a reckless move, abandoning a stable career for uncertainty. As Christmas approached, Yumi wanted to get Bobby the perfect gift. But just then, her landlord suddenly raised the rent, plunging her already tight finances into deeper strain. Since resigning, she'd been living off her savings with a carefully laid-out budget for the year. The sudden rent hike shattered those plans. Still determined to make Bobby feel special, Yumi decided to sell her an used rice cooker online, hoping to get 120,000 won for it. The buyer only offered 110,000. Though money was tight, Yumi didn't push back. She ended up dipping into her savings to buy Bobby's gift. That evening, the two of them bought a cake and planned to spend a cozy Christmas Eve together. But just before heading home, the rice cooker buyer messaged Yumi again, requesting to meet that night for the transaction. She wanted to refuse, but couldn't ignore the value of the money. She told Bobby she had an urgent errand and would come to his place in 30 minutes. When she arrived at the meeting point, Yumi was stunned. The buyer was none other than Guong. In less than a year, everything about him had changed. His once long, curly hair was gone. He looked noticeably thinner. Meanwhile, Yumi, who had short hair when they broke up, now wore her hair long and carried herself with new confidence and grace. Guong had a lot he wanted to say, but Yumi didn't give him the chance. She simply handed him the rice cooker they had agreed on and named the price. Although Guong was struggling financially, he pulled out 120,000 won without hesitation and told her to keep the change. Yumi tried to return the extra cash, but he insisted, clearly shaken. Tears welled up in Guong's eyes. He hadn't expected this reunion to be even more painful than their breakup. The truth was, Yumi wasn't as indifferent as she had made herself appear. On the way back to Bobby's place, her thoughts lingered on Guong. He looked worn down. Was he going through something difficult? It was then she discovered that Guong's company had gone under long ago. He had been facing the darkest time of his life, and she hadn't been there for him. Her chest tightened. Had she been too cold by turning and walking away without a word? Should she have at least said, "Merry Christmas"? Back at home, Bobby was joyfully preparing Christmas dinner for Yumi, completely unaware of what had just transpired. Yumi's mood had changed entirely after seeing her ex. Guong, too, couldn't stop thinking about Yumi. Back when they broke up, he had told her he'd landed a job at a major company and didn't plan to get married, choosing his career over love. But that was a lie. He only said it to keep her from enduring the fallout of his failed startup. The truth was, his life after the breakup was far from easy. He'd accumulated massive debt, suffered through sleepless nights, and on several occasions almost reached out to her, only to stop himself, afraid he'd break down at the sound of her voice. His pride wouldn't let him show weakness. At that moment, Yumi received a text message. Thinking it was from her father, she asked Bobby to check it for her. While Bobby, still full of cheer, continued cooking, Yumi realized it was a message from Guong. She felt a pang of guilt. What Yumi didn't know was, Bobby had recognized the sender. He had seen that the message was from Guong, but he didn't say a word. He wanted Yumi to make the decision on her own. He gave Yumi and Guong the space they needed without hesitation. Bobby believed that true trust in a relationship meant even a former boyfriend like Guong wouldn't be able to shake their bond. As soon as Guong saw Yumi arrive, his eyes lit up. He rushed toward her, clearly overwhelmed. But Yumi, much like Bobby, was now straightforward and sincere. She said plainly, "The message I sent, it was just to say Merry Christmas." Guong was caught off guard. His heart ached. Only now did he realize, Yumi had come not to reconnect, but to make it clear they shouldn't meet again. Days passed. Yumi's writing submissions were repeatedly rejected, while Bobby's career soared. He was transferred to Jeju Island, and the growing distance between them made Yumi anxious. She feared they were becoming too different, so in her spare time, she picked up a part-time job, trying to close that gap. After her manuscript was rejected for the 8th time, Yumi lost all confidence. Maybe she never had real talent for writing at all. But she didn't want Bobby to worry. She forced a smile. To clear her mind, she traveled to Jeju to visit Bobby. The moment he saw her, he could sense something was wrong. He gently encouraged her not to give up. There would always be another opportunity. Yumi, already emotionally fragile, burst into tears. She was truly heartbroken and exhausted. But this was the life she had chosen. Even before she had time to dry her tears, she received a message from the publishing house. Though her piece hadn't won, the editors found her concept fresh and compelling. They wanted to publish her book. The joy was overwhelming. Yumi and Bobby embraced in happiness. That night they went to the beach. Fireworks lit up the distant sky, celebrating not just the holiday but their love. Quietly, Bobby placed Yumi's hand into his coat pocket. When she pulled it out, there was a ring, an engagement ring. It turned out that day was their 1-year anniversary. Yumi was moved to tears by the surprise. She truly believed she and Bobby could stay this happy forever. Eventually, Yumi and Bobby broke up. Sometime later, Yumi unexpectedly spotted a familiar figure, Guong. 2 years after their breakup, they crossed paths again. The moment Guong saw her, his heart stirred. He had never truly forgotten Yumi. Not long ago, Guong had discovered that Yumi had become a published author. He pretended to be indifferent in front of his friends, but as soon as they turned away, he ran straight to the bookstore. He bought every copy of her book in stock. One day, while Yumi visited the store to quietly observe reader reactions, she noticed her books had sold out. Her heart swelled with joy and disbelief. 2 years ago, after his startup failed, Guong had hit rock bottom. Seeing Yumi again, he tried to act cool and show her how far he had come. He casually leaned on his luxury car, flashing success like a badge of honor. But Yumi couldn't help laughing. He was still just as childish and lovable as before. The truth was, Yumi already knew about Guong's success. She had read about him in a magazine feature and knew the game he developed was wildly popular. From the bottom of her heart, she felt happy for him. After saying goodbye to Yumi, Guong's feelings were all over the place. But one thing was clear, his heart had started to beat again. A year earlier, on Christmas, Guong had considered trying to win her back, but she already had a boyfriend. He couldn't accept that, so he looked up her social media and discovered that boyfriend was Yubaba. From that moment, Guong made up his mind. He would no longer involve himself in Yumi's life. He spent 6 months forcing himself to let go. Guong threw himself into work, hoping that staying busy would help numb the pain. The first thing Guong did after recommitting to work was to switch illustrators, the very one through whom he had originally met Yumi. But during that conversation, the illustrator casually mentioned that Yumi had broken up with her boyfriend a few months ago. Learning Yumi was now single, something shifted inside Guong. There was only one thought echoing in his mind now. He had to win Yumi back. He created multiple anonymous accounts and flooded the comment section under Yumi's new novel updates with endless praise. His over-the-top compliments made Yumi chuckle each time she read them. She genuinely enjoyed it, even if she couldn't place why the support felt oddly familiar. One day, Yumi received a call from a coworker. Her ex, Bobby, had just returned from out of town, and since they lived in the same apartment complex, the colleague wanted to give her a heads up so she wouldn't accidentally run into him unprepared. In the days that followed, Yumi started intentionally avoiding places where Bobby might show up. She wouldn't even buy her favorite bread from the nearby bakery anymore. But then, one day, she really wanted a coffee. Unfortunately, it was from a cafe Bobby used to frequent. Yumi hesitated. She hadn't put on makeup, and her outfit was a total mess. But it was a weekday, she reasoned. What were the odds? With that, she lowered her internal alarms and stepped into the cafe. As she waited in line, she suddenly heard a familiar voice behind her. Reflexively, she turned, and there was Bobby. Yumi greeted him with confidence, though she made sure to keep a polite distance. Eventually, she said goodbye, keeping things light, but just as she turned to leave, Bobby called out to her. He stepped forward and, without hesitation, confessed how much he missed her. The sweet memories they shared, he said, still lingered painfully in his heart. Since their breakup, his world had gone gray. He had once tried to win her back but had been too late. Afterward, when Bobby ran into Dune again, he treated her coldly. He had already moved past that chapter. Eventually, he returned to Seoul and quietly followed Yumi's writing career. Though he avoided all the places where he might run into her, wanting not to disrupt her life, he still longed for the day he might see her again. He already knew what he wanted to say. "I thought I would die from missing you," he said softly. In that moment, Yumi's carefully constructed emotional walls began to crumble. She had imagined this encounter countless times. She had told herself she wouldn't feel anything, that she no longer missed Bobby. But now, tears spilled from her eyes, sudden and unstoppable. Bobby's heart ached seeing her like this. He silently vowed never to let her get hurt again. But reconciling after a breakup? That was one of the hardest things to pull off. Reality rarely matched romantic ideals. They started spending time together again, going on dates like they used to. But something was off. Yumi felt a quiet awkwardness she couldn't shake. The next day, while meeting an illustrator to discuss collaboration, Yumi ran into Guong. It was clearly no coincidence. She instantly realized the illustrator had orchestrated the meeting to give them a chance to reconnect. But Yumi had already reconciled with Bobby. Even if she wasn't ready to announce it publicly, maybe she needed to tell Guong directly. But he didn't know. With hope still in his eyes, Guong invited her to dinner. Yumi hesitated. There were so many men in the world. Why did people always go back to their exes? That mixture of frustration and helplessness made Guong blurt things out without thinking. If Yumi couldn't be with him, then at the very least, he wanted to see her off respectfully. But Yumi, sensing potential gossip or misunderstandings, insisted on taking a taxi instead. Guong had no choice but to let her go. Later, Yumi called Bobby. She explained a friend had broken a bone and needed help, so she'd be late for their date. But when she mentioned it was Guong, Bobby's heart sank. Though Yumi reassured him it was just a work-related coincidence, he couldn't help but feel uneasy. Meanwhile, Guong felt embarrassed and defeated. He didn't want to ruin Yumi's night any further. "Go ahead," he said softly, trying to sound casual. "I'm not in a great mood anyway." Just then, Yumi noticed Guong's shirt had torn, likely from his earlier stumble. It stirred a wave of compassion in her. Memories of their time together flooded back. When she once fell ill, he had rushed her to the hospital, cradling her in his arms, even buying her fresh clothes. She couldn't let him go home like this. On her way to buy him a change of clothes, Yumi realized she had left her phone behind. Guong noticed and decided to bring it to her, only to run right into Bobby. The tension was immediate. Two rivals standing face to face. Bobby took the phone, calm on the surface. But when Guong began speaking on Yumi's behalf, implying Bobby wasn't good enough for her, things heated up. Bobby, no fool, picked up on Guong's tone instantly. The mood was explosive. Bobby no longer held back either. The verbal sparring intensified until Guong was left speechless. Bobby accused him of meddling in matters that weren't his business. Guong was devastated, emotionally defeated. But if he couldn't win Yumi's heart, maybe he could still win the status game. He reminded Bobby that he was now the CEO of a publicly listed company, while Bobby was merely a mid-level manager at a food company. For a moment, the power balance tilted. At that moment, Yumi returned. She hadn't been able to buy the clothes because she'd forgotten her phone. Bobby took off his coat and tried to hand it to Guong, but Guong snapped. Who would want to wear their romantic rival's clothes? Yumi stepped in quickly, stopping them and firmly telling Guong not to say another word. As Yumi and Bobby walked away together, Guong stood still, watching their backs disappear into the distance. That's when Yumi realized, getting back together after a breakup might be the hardest kind of relationship to maintain. Later that day, she met Bobby for a date and specially wore their anniversary couple ring. Not long ago, she had discovered that Bobby had been wearing his the whole time. Touched by how much he understood her, Yumi decided to wear hers again and face him with a renewed heart. But what she saw at the cafe crushed her. What was supposed to be a sweet moment turned painfully awkward. Bobby got up to order drinks, but then returned suddenly, saying he didn't want her to feel pressured. Though Yumi said she didn't mind, deep down, she was uncomfortable. She quickly changed the topic, mentioning that next week was his birthday and suggesting they go sing in the park. But Bobby replied that he would be on a business trip. Yumi felt another pang of disappointment. Ever since they got back together, things hadn't returned to how they used to be. There was now a distance, something unfamiliar and awkward. After the date, Bobby drove Yumi home and helped carry her things to the door. In the past, Yumi would have asked him to stay a little longer. But this time, she couldn't bring herself to say it. Watching him leave, she wondered, had getting back together really been the right choice? Back inside, she quietly took off the couple ring and closed the drawer, along with her heart. On the day of Bobby's business trip, Yumi had set an early alarm, planning to see him off. But when she woke up, she found a message from him. Not wanting to wake her, he had already left for the airport. She called him, but the line didn't go through. That day, a strange feeling of emptiness took hold. She kept checking for messages. Finally, late at night, Bobby replied briefly to say he was safe, then went to sleep. Eventually, when he did call her, the conversation barely lasted 2 minutes. After that, his messages became fewer and shorter. Not even a photo. He was either visiting factories or in meetings. Yumi couldn't help but wonder, had Bobby regretted getting back together? Even so, on his birthday, Yumi prepared a cake and tried to call him via video to surprise him. But he didn't pick up. Instead, she got a message saying he was in transit. All she could do was text him a birthday wish. His short reply, "Thanks," felt like a cold splash of water. Feeling heavy-hearted, Yumi went out for a walk. As she was crossing the street, she suddenly saw Bobby sitting in a taxi. Shocked, she thought she was seeing things. He was supposed to be on a business trip in the US? Why was he here? Once the car passed, she came to her senses and rushed to hail a cab, needing answers. Had he lied to her? Was there someone else? She followed him to his apartment but suddenly hesitated. What if he was with someone else? How would she handle that? But curiosity and hurt overpowered her fear. When Bobby opened the door and saw her, he froze in surprise. It turned out Bobby had been in a car accident on the way to his business trip. He hadn't told Yumi, afraid she'd worry. Yumi was torn between anger and heartbreak. Why hadn't he told her something so serious? Was this still a relationship at all? They had both been tiptoeing around each other, trying to repair what was broken. But the more they tried, the further apart they drifted. As if afraid she would change her mind, Bobby brought Yumi to meet his parents the very next day. With their blessing, Yumi's heart softened, filled with joy. She couldn't resist posting photos, happily showing off her long-dreamed-of moment. When Guong heard that Yumi was going to marry Bobby, his eyes turned red. He wanted to offer her a genuine blessing as a friend, but deep down, he couldn't accept it. In a sudden impulse, he went to the neighborhood where Yumi lived. They had shared some of the happiest moments of their lives there. Every evening, Yumi would wait at her window for him to come down. Snapping out of his memories, he noticed movers carrying Yumi's sofa. Was she moving into the new place with Bobby? He walked into her apartment, and the flood of memories nearly brought him to tears. Guong quickly left the painful scene, only to unexpectedly run into Yumi. She looked strangely distraught, which made him pause. Why did she look so upset? Feeling uneasy, Guong pulled out the wedding invitation he hadn't dared open earlier, only to realize he had misunderstood. The invitation wasn't for Yumi's wedding, but for her colleagues. Relieved, he rushed back, only to discover that Yumi had moved simply because she had bought a new home. Yumi soon came down with a bad cold and lay sick at home. Her boyfriend Bobby was incredibly caring, cooking porridge for her himself and staying up all night by her side. But on this otherwise sweet and comforting day, Yumi discovered that Doon, the same colleague who had once been ambiguously close with Bobby, was calling him again. Their breakup hadn't been caused by Doon's late-night calls, or by the fact that Bobby had never deleted her number. The real issue was something deeper. It wasn't about Yumi being unreasonable. It wasn't even about Bobby and Doon, really. It was about the space that had slowly formed between Yumi and Bobby, gaps filled with silence, hesitation, and unanswered questions. Yumi felt like she was spiraling. She decided to attend the wedding first and figure everything else out afterward. Meanwhile, Bobby had been reassigned to a branch in Singapore and was preparing to head to the airport. Just then he got a call from a cafe. Yumi had accidentally left her laptop there, and they asked him to return it to her. Bobby wanted to deliver it to her personally, but traffic was terrible and his flight was approaching fast. In the end, he had no choice but to leave the laptop in an airport storage locker. Whether it was the emotion of watching her colleague's wedding or Bobby's gentle message about the laptop, tears welled up in Yumi's eyes and wouldn't stop. Right after the ceremony, she rushed to the airport. When she recovered her laptop, she let out a huge sigh of relief. Though Bobby's flight had already departed, she still wanted to say thank you. Just as she's about to send the message, she spots Bobby behind her. Yumi breaks up with Bobby after realizing their relationship lost its spark and honesty. Bobby smiles gently and lets her go. Now living alone, Yumi decided to pour her heart into her work. Whenever she ran out of inspiration, she cleaned the house. When she was tired, she'd lie in bed to rest. After successfully submitting her manuscript, she looked over and realized she had her laptop again, only it wasn't the one she lost. When Guong had heard about her losing her laptop, he secretly bought her a new one and gifted it to her. Guong really was a quietly thoughtful man. One day, Yumi decided to return the laptop to him in person. While waiting, she happened to glance at his desk. There were tons of anonymous online accounts. She looked closer and realized something surprising. All the glowing comments on her novel, the ones that gave her the courage to keep going, had been written by Guong. Those encouraging words had become her emotional lifeline. When Guong learned that Yumi had come to his company, he rushed to see her but was so nervous he stumbled and fell. Seeing him still so adorably clumsy made Yumi laugh out loud. That evening, she attended a party hosted by her publisher. She had a great time, but when she got home, she couldn't fall asleep. She stared out the window at the season's first snow, her heart quietly hoping for a new chapter in love.
Footsteps fade, the echoes call, 1,000 dreams begin to fall. And it's over, it's over. The curtains drawn, the story fades, but the feeling's strong.
Korean Netflix like, comment and subscribe.